Hello everybody and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program, where last episode we created this, which is a bit of a monstrosity, and it has more struts than it needs at this point, for sure. 1000%, that is true. I'd like to remove some of these before we go because it is absolutely an eyesore. So let's see how it goes if we remove these struts that are up here. And there we go. Wait, there's one more here. There we go. We remove these struts. I want to leave these. Well, actually, let's remove them and find out how it feels. The only struts that I believe are currently necessary are the ones that are linking our sky crane to our survey station, and our survey station, well, to the center core. These struts here are useful, but I don't think are strictly speaking necessary. So I'm going to ditch those. I'm going to leave the struts connecting out here, but I'm going to remove these struts. I'm going to remove these struts, and I'm going to remove these struts for right now. These should be unnecessary. These should be unnecessary. These should be unnecessary in theory. And we'll see how this ends up going. But this should be reasonably fine at this point. I believe we've addressed the root issue of the instability here, and let's just test that theory real quick. So I'm taking off every single strut except for the ones that I believe are strictly speaking necessary at this time. So that should be these gone as well, and these should go away. Cool. Okay, these can go too. There. I think that should be it. That should give us the stability that we need. Let's run one quick test. It's still a bit of an eyesore with all those struts, but let's run a quick test here and just see if our bending is good. And if not, well, we can address those particular points. But I believe that our bending should be good with these particular points that we have right now. I think this should solve our root stability issue. Let's find out. Any moment now, it loads in. Saw some wiggling here. That's noted. So let's put this into surface up, throttle up, and let's go. I'm noting a yaw oscillation and a pitch oscillation. It doesn't appear to be getting worse yet. It likely will. There's definitely an oscillation built up there, which is unexpected. If we pull this back, can we just undo removing all of those struts? We may still be able to undo them. No. Okay. So in that case, we need to think about where we're still going to have wiggle points of failure, right? I did expect that this would be sufficient. It apparently is not. So I do think that we have a significant point of failure here. So I want to redo these struts, which I thought about keeping, but I want to redo those. And then I want to also run struts like this. Let's see if that does the trick. We want to run a fairly minimal set of struts, but if we have a couple too many struts, that's okay. We can harvest these struts once we arrive on the planet's surface and use them for other things. So having struts here is not necessarily a bad thing. I just didn't want to go with quite as many as we had there. Keep in mind, these struts do carry mass, so that is absolutely a bit of an issue. We'll put this into surface up, And as soon as we're loaded in here, that looked more stable. Let's see how this looks. I see a yaw oscillation. Potentially smoothing out. A pitch oscillation. It's significantly smoother than it was. Okay, let's just leave this be for the moment. We're going to go straight up here until our SRBs burn out, and then we're going to hard turn over to... Actually, we should just hard turn now, shouldn't we? Well, not now. I'm going to hard turn at 10 kilometers here. We're going to keep simulating this and see how the aerodynamics feel at this point. This is not how we're going to do a real ascent profile, for the record. Not in the slightest. So, 10, and over we go. That's what I wanted to see. Okay. Now we know. So we can pull this back, and what we saw there was that our buckle point was actually this fuel adapter, oddly enough. That's not exactly an expected outcome, but it is what happened. So this fuel adapter turned on us. This was quite rigid. So what do we want to do about that? Well, I think that the best answer to that is probably... Actually, I'm thinking that we might be best off running a pair of struts from here to here. Like that. That might give us the rigidity that we need. Let's see how that goes. Because our bottom half of our rocket is quite rigid, and our top half of our rocket appeared quite rigid in that test. So once again, I want to do a very big stress test to try to figure out where weak points are going to be here. Aerodynamics actually felt pretty decent there, but that turn, oof. These wiggle around, that's understood. I don't care about them. So we're going to go to surface up, and let's do this one more time. We should be watching for oscillations here. I do see that yaw oscillation. There's a small pitch oscillation as well, but it appears to be smoothing out, or at least not. It's not a positive feedback loop. Okay. So that looks good for the moment, and we're going to take this over to Procreate, and let's see if that solved our fuel adapter turning problem. That was a pretty wild problem, to be clear. So we're going to take this to Procreate, not Retrograde. Retrograde would be a really weird place to go right now, but let's go to Procreate, and let's keep an eye on this. Okay, so it's still pivoting on that same point. Noted. So, to that end, the concave shape of that makes this a little bit complicated for us. But I'm wondering if maybe we should just run this set of struts that pre-existed to here instead. And get rid of this. And just run it like this. Let's see what that does. We definitely have a bit of a weak joint there. But it might be because the struts were putting too much force on that one location, and this might be a stronger place to put that force. We'll see. There's clearly a lot of force going on there. Now, we're not actually going to undergo this sort of a radical turn in the ascent. This is an insane turn to be trying to take. Wow, that was very bouncy right up in here. That's inauspicious. We're leaning at this moment. We're pitching. We're just going to fall without ever actually leaving the pad like this. This is remarkable. I'm just letting this play out. So we know that the joint weakness is right up here now. It's springing back now. Okay, so we don't even need to lift this off. We know that where the joint weakness is. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, instead of running the struts here, I'm going to take this off of here. And in two-sided symmetry, we're going to go from here to right there. We'll try to add some additional strength there. Now, we might have an issue at the decoupler here. Actually, we'd be better off if we were to connect up over this way, probably. But for right now, let's see what that does. Let's see what that does. So I'm going to put us in physics warp here. I want to have more extreme physics situations because we're trying to test the rigidity of this thing, right? We're struggling far more with the rigidity of this than I would have expected, but it's fine. We'll get it there. We only have to do this once. So let's see what we've got here. Surface up. Definitely still very, very bouncy here. Okay. Physics warp definitely broke it a bit, and that's fine. So yeah, it's that joint that's the issue at this point. So with that in mind, our best bet then is to make sure that... I really would have thought that this strut here to here and here to here would fix that. I really thought that that would be the case. Apparently not. Let's see what happens if we run it from here to here instead. These are connected a bit differently, and they'll be interesting for sure. Another thing that we could do is we could run struts simply internally there. If this doesn't work, I'm going to do that. And I'll explain what that means in a moment. That what I just said probably doesn't make a lot of sense. But we'll see what this does first, and then I have another idea. Okay, let's see what we've got going on here. A little less bouncy. Well, it's not built out of explodium this time, but it's, you know, still quite a problem. That was pretty entertaining, actually. Let's pull that back to the VAB, and the idea that I had is that instead of running these struts here, we should probably just take struts inside here. We can't zoom in any closer than this, so we should probably just take struts from here. So I'm going to run them about here to about here. That's only in 2x symmetry, so let's just go ahead and do another one. So one here, and that can just connect up probably directly to the decoupler. That'll be okay. So something about like that should increase the rigidity in that area. Let's see by how much. This is still insane to me that we need this level of strutting to make this actually be rigid. I'm wondering actually how heavy this top portion is. It's probably significantly heavy. So let's get this in here, and as soon as we get loaded in, we are going to do a physics warp test, and then we'll do a off the pad test if it passes it. That looked better. Okay. Point of failure is higher now. The point of failure is no longer down here. So that was progress. The point of failure at this point is now our adapter segment. So that is this guy here, the modular girder adapter. So with that in mind, I still would think that these struts would be sufficient for this, but apparently not. So with that in mind, we are going to run struts in quad symmetry is not going to do it. Okay, so struts from here to here. And that will hopefully increase the rigidity of this a decent amount. So 1, 2, 3, and we'll do a fourth out over this way. Okay. We'll try that. I'm kind of sad at this point that I removed those initial struts. I should have saved that as a different file, that's very clear, because we had good rigidity through sheer accident, but at least this way we're learning where the points of failure are and directly addressing each point of failure. But I have never seen this many struts be required to keep something in place. Okay. That's a far better test. These here moved a bit when we entered into physics warp, but look at that. That is much better. Okay, let's put this into surface up, throttle up, and let's run a simulation here. So we see an initial oscillation. I am seeing movement up here that is not mirrored by the full rocket, so that's a bad sign. Huh. This is bad. Point of failure is back to being down here. Well, that's rude. Okay, we'll try this again. Man, this thing really does not want to sit in place. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take struts, and we're going to go from here to here, and from here to here. And then we're going to go from here to here, and from here to here. Will that fix it? I have my doubts, but we'll see. We will see. So the first test that we'll run, once again, is a physics warp test. I really don't think that this thing should be made this much out of spaghetti. It doesn't feel right. There's something very strange happening here, for sure. I've never had it be quite this spaghetti noodly. Well, let's just get this test done, and if we get it to the point where it's fully strutted again, I will definitely accept that. Okay. We passed the physics warp test. Next up, let's put ourselves into up, and let's do the thrusters. It's more stable. It might be stable enough. Although, I have concerns about what happens after we ditch these two tanks. That'll be interesting. Our oscillation is gone. There's no oscillation right now. We're about to do a bad thing, and we're about to give it a huge amount of sideways force. Actually, that was a pass of that test. That was a pass. You might be confused by that statement, but we just passed that test. Yeah, there was a tumble. Yeah, we're in a really bad attitude here. Yeah, we're tumbling again. It doesn't matter. The test here was to determine the rigidity of this, and this is very rigid at this point. The attitude here is irrelevant. We made a mistake. Or not really a mistake. We did things that we shouldn't. Specifically, what's our thrust to weight right now? 0.77? Okay, that's a bit low. But specifically, the mistake that we made is that we just cranked it over to prograde, and we knew that that would be a problem. So let's take this back to launch, and let's start thinking about the ascent profile of this, now that I'm fairly convinced that we have a solid amount of rigidity. Although I'm still somewhat concerned about the rigidity of this thing once we are on that last tank there. We'll see. We might have to take this up to 4 instead of what we have here, which is 2 side tanks. But that'll be a job for another day, most likely, if we end up choosing to do that. So what I want to do right now is I want to take this to surface up, and we're just going to lift this thing straight off here. Our goal right now is to determine whether it is safe to do a turn at 20-kilometer periapsis. We've been doing it at 10, which is a very extreme turn, and that has been to generate huge amounts of forces up here for rigidity tests. So for now, we're done with that. We just passed that test. It looks good. What we need to do now is get a bunch of vertical speed. We are going to go over to orbital prograde, but later. The air will be thinner. We'll have more vertical speed. And we are going to have less of a turn by going at 20. So let's see what this feels like. We'll do a detach test here because I am still a little concerned about detachment here. Okay, that's an apoapsis of 20. Ooh, that's still a lot of turn. Okay. So that's still a little too much on the turn. So we're going to have to wait until later. That is absolutely noted. Let's pull this back then, and let's try 30. We'll see how that feels. We just have a lot of mass in that upper portion, and that's making this awkward for us. So we'll be fine. We just need to dial in our ascent trajectory here and figure out where this needs to be. I think 30 kilometers is probably okay. 40 is almost certainly okay. So let's put ourselves in surface up, and off we go. Fantastic. We could just go straight up until these SRBs detach. That's an option, although it's not a particularly efficient way to get us to space. It is potentially a safer way to get us to space. So we shall see. We can also duplicate our side stacks and just not worry too much about the strutting over here, because I do like this being connected directly into the center core here. I think that's a good thing. And that would mean that this fuel would last longer, but our thrust to weight would be a little lower, especially once our SRB is detached. We'll see. For now, I'm just taking this to 30, and we'll see what this feels like. This is just a very strange weight distribution on this thing. There's 30, and let's see. This feels much more under control. Much more under control. We've only got about 10 more seconds at this point on the SRBs, and detachment here is absolutely a concern. So we'll see what that looks like. Ooh, that was bad. We lost one of our tail fins at the very end there. That gives us an oscillation because we now have to use gimbaling to correct for that. We can take ourselves over to horizontal velocity up, but this is going to be spicy at this point. You can see there's already a bit of an issue going on there. So we actually lost 2 of our fins. Okay. So we can turn these fins off, but that's still going to be a little rough. So we definitely need a little bit more fuel to get this to orbit. That detachment was an issue, and we could think about having more SRB and more fuel here. It's a distinct option. I'm just looking at our time to apoapsis. Our thrust to weight on this is still a little on the low side, but mostly our issue right now is that we lost those fins, and that gave us an oscillation. But this is actually kind of okay. Like, we would get to orbit. I don't think this would get to Duna at this point, but we would get to orbit. So that was definitely a non-clean detachment there, which I'm not terribly shocked about. What I want to see now is what will this look like with this engine active. So we can determine that from this test, and that'll be great. Let's just bring this on in. we've definitely got some artificial gravity going on here, which isn't really the goal. Okay. So thrust to weight here is 0.3. And we should be able to get this spin under control here pretty soon. The oscillation isn't so bad here. So this doesn't appear to be a major issue right now, but the real question is, what will it look like once we get rid of these guys? Okay, I'm doing some manual intervention here to work on this spin a bit. And it appears to be having very little effect. I'm going to cut the engines, and we're going to freeze physics. Does that deal with the spin? It does. So that's manageable. Good to know. Now, this would definitely get to orbit, but we're burning too much fuel here right now. This is not, in fact, going to be the goal for the moment. So, we need to do detachments on our side boosters, and I feel like we probably should duplicate these side boosters as well. So, let's have another batch of them right about here. And I'm not going to worry about strut work over here. I'm going to leave this strut the way it is. All of this strutting will be absolutely fine for right now. That means we'll have a little bit more fuel for this stage. And our SRBs are probably going to burn a little bit longer, aren't they? What's our thrust to weight? 1.6, actually. Okay, that's interesting. But it is time to put a cut in here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Next episode, we're going to run a quick test with this. I still have concerns about the SRB detachment, and in fact, those are larger concerns. So we'll probably use like Separatrons or something along those lines. But we're getting very, very close to being finished with this, at long last. I'm still surprised at the amount of rigidity issues that we have with this. I feel like we shouldn't need this number of struts, but okay. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings, and a very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this video possible, including ALS Gamer, Dark Horse, Ethan Feldman, Aurelio, Upper Cumberland Gamers, Nick Smarty, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, The Lounge STL, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button down below the video, and as always, I will see you all next time.